The house. There was once an enormous house with hundreds of rooms. In these rooms lived many, many people, sleeping, waking up, eating, drinking, and going about their daily business. The house was not a very safe house. Things were always going wrong, and many unfortunate accidents were had by the people of the rooms. For the most part, the people accepted this as a part of life in the house. They thought that unfortunate accidents were to be expected because nothing is perfect, and the builders of the house had surely done the best they could when building it. Occasionally, a few people got upset, especially when they were the ones affected by the unfortunate accidents, and complained to the builders, who usually sent a representative round to fix the odd hole in the wall, patch up a few windows, assure the people that all was well, and generally smooth things over. The complainers were not always satisfied, but with no other recourse at hand and surrounded by others telling them that everything was okay and not to worry, they soon found it too difficult to swim against the tide and turned back to their distractions. And distractions there were aplenty, for the thoughtful builders had not only built a place for people to live, they had built a place where people could have fun. There was sport, entertainment, recreational activities, an endless array of courses to learn about an endless array of subjects, gardens for those who liked to grow flowers, any number of different spiritual centres, and, on the more illicit side, there was easy sex, alcohol, drugs and gambling. There was something for everyone. Of course, a few of the die-hard complainers said that the builders only provided the distractions so that people would spend all their time on them rather than focusing on all the accidents their shoddy building work was causing. But they were written off as troublemakers or slapped on the back and told to come to a distraction centre and forget about it. If they persisted in making a noise, house security would come and have a word with them and, if necessary, look after them in a secure place for a little while, so that they did not interfere with the enjoyment of the rest of the inhabitants of the house. For the most part, the people of the house were too caught up debating and even fighting over whose distraction was the best and which distraction everybody ought to follow to spend time thinking about the builders and their failure to provide a safe house. Given the problems with the house, most of the inhabitants were happy to leave it to the builders and had little time for anyone who suggested that there might be a way to improve the house or even do away with it altogether. As well as distractions, the builders of the house provided learning centres for children where, from an early age, they were instructed on and taught to memorise how the house worked, the rules of the house, the infrastructure of the house, and how to do their part in maintaining the house. It was also explained to them that there wasn't really any other way to live apart from in the house, and that, unfortunate though the accidents were, there wasn't really anything the inhabitants of the house could do, and that the builders were doing their best to set things right and would be able to do so if they had the support of the inhabitants of the house. As they grew up, the children of the house could either continue learning about the hows and whys of the house, or they could start working for the house. This was another way the inhabitants of the house filled their time. Most of them spent many of their waking hours working for the builders of the house in all areas of the house. Some added new rooms for new people, others worked maintaining the infrastructure of the house, while still more worked in the area of distractions, running the sport, entertainment, etc. Others worked for the builders making improvements to the house, which were always widely broadcast as progress, but which somehow never seemed to solve the problems of the house. There were those who learned how to instruct children in the learning centres, those who joined house security, and also those who learned how to provide medication for those suffering from the ill effects of their distractions and life in the house in general. These medications did not cure the sufferers, but allowed them to get back to work and to their distractions as quickly as possible. Indeed, the sufferers did not expect to be cured because most people around them were not completely healthy, so they accepted ill health as the norm. Of course, the builders of the house tried to help them with all sorts of initiatives, but somehow disease and ill health persisted. Work was considered very important because the type of work a man did determined how they lived within the house. Those whose work was deemed very important were given bigger, smarter rooms and access to more supplies than others whose work was not thought to be so important, even though there was often little difference in time spent working. Not surprisingly, those who received less for their effort felt resentful towards those who received more, which led to the erection of barriers between different parts of the house. Barriers were also erected between those who felt so strongly about their chosen distraction that they could not live near supporters of a different distraction without coming to blows. A few inhabitants tried to bring everyone together to focus on how to deal with the problems of the house, but habits were entrenched and common ground not to be found. So the unfortunate accidents and problems with the infrastructure of the house continued. There were problems with food and water supplies, overcrowding, roomlessness due to people not working hard enough to keep their rooms, and a house security that was overstretched dealing with inhabitants who refused to obey the rules of the house. Suffering was growing to such an extent that even the usually most contented house inhabitants began to murmur about improvements being needed. Too many people were hurting, too many people were sick, and too many people were struggling just to have food and a ceiling over their heads. Something had to be done. Finally, the builders of the house called a meeting. They had a solution. They had built a new house, an improved house for everyone to live in. The new house had a much stronger and more powerful house security, whose job would be much easier because all the inhabitants of the new house would have a member marker in them so that they could be instantly identified. This would make it less complicated for them to get supplies of food, water and whatever else they needed, and easier for them to travel about. Even better, no one would be allowed to live in the new house unless they received injections that would keep them safe from the many diseases of the old house and ensure that they were happy and willing to accept the rules of the new house. The builders would be able to keep a much closer eye on everything to ensure that life ran smoothly and that any unfortunate accidents were kept to a minimum. The builders ensured the people that they had looked at all the alternatives and were more than satisfied that a new house was the best solution available for everyone, especially as the new house was equipped with even more distraction centres than the old one. There would be even more fun for all. Most of the people were happy. They would be able to move to the new improved house and get on with their lives of working for the house and enjoying the distractions of the house. A few were not happy and voiced their discontent. They did not see how the new house was an improvement to the old house, especially as it seemed to be just an updated version of the same. They questioned how the problems of the old house would not begin to appear in the new house. They appealed to the builders to reconsider and even said they would like to build their own houses without help from the builders. The builders smiled and gently suggested that they had done the research and it was not possible for the people to take on such responsibility. Without house security in place, anything might happen. Without the new injections, who knew what diseases might run rampant? And without the learning centres, how would the children understand the importance of the house? To be sure of food, water and a place to stay, the new house was the only option. The demolition team was booked for the old house and systems were already set up for the transition from the old house to the new one. There really wasn't anywhere else to go.